Hi everyone. In this video, I'm going to discuss about the chain of the responsibility pattern. That is a part of the behavioral pattern. So you can see that in the behavioral design pattern, we have multiple pattern, right? So chain of the responsibility is one of the patterns. So we'll discuss in detail of the chain of the responsibility, how it works, what is the advantage, disadvantage. When we should go for the chain of the responsibility, and we'll take on code also. We'll write on code also to understand it. So behavioral design pattern are concerned with the interaction and the responsibility of the object, right? In a chain of the responsibility, the sender send a request to the chain of the object. Okay. So here we see that each and every person just considered as a object. Okay. When sender send a one bucket is the request. Just consider this bucket is the request. When the sender send a request, right, as a bucket to the object, the any object can handle this request. Okay. So that means request can be handled by anybody. It's not like a very specific person can handle the request. Okay, so that's loose coupling is here. Similarly, you can take the example of when we call to the customer care support, right, for any of our request or any of our query, right? So when you call it for the request, that request goes to the system, right? From system, it will ask few of the question, specific question. When you press the button, it will go to the specific the employee, okay, specific department, I mean to say. And then again, if it is not solved, then they will forward this right, request to the other department, right? So this is also the kind of the I'm sending the request and the different object, right? Different department is handling the request. If the first department is not able to handle here, okay, they will transfer to the next department, right? If this object is also not able to handle, then they will transfer to the other object. So this is the chain of the responsibility, right? So every object is responsible for the handling the request. Okay. Let's talk about the real life example. Here in our real life, right, we get the IT issue. Okay. Everything is simple, then it will go to the frontline support, and frontline support manager can handle this one. Okay. This if the frontline manager able to handle it, then that request is goes here itself. Okay. If frontline manager is not able to handle, okay, or frontline support people are not able to handle, then this request will transfer to the other, right, the second line of the support manager. And if support manager is second line of the support manager is able to handle the request, then fine, right? If second line of the support manager is not able to handle the request, then it will go to the next line of the right team. So that will be the internal support managers, and that these guys will try to handle. If finally it will not get to handle, then the on-site supporter people will start looking into this. So this is kind of the we have the object, different object like frontline support managers, second line support manager, internal support manager, and on-site support manager. These are the objects. Okay, so they are taking the request, trying to handle it. If they will handle it, fine. Otherwise, they will transfer this request to the other object. Okay, so this will be the request will go in a chain. What is the definition of the chain of the responsibility? Avoid coupling the sender of the request to its receiver by giving the multiple object a chance to handle the request. Okay, so first thing is we are avoiding the coupling from the sender request to the particular receiver. Okay, because any of the receiver can receive and they can handle the request. In a chain of the responsibility, the sender sends a request to the chain of the objects, okay, and request can be handled by the object in the chain. So any of the object in a chain, right, can handle the request. We can say that normally each receiver contains a reference of the other receiver, right? If one of the object cannot handle the request, then it will passes the same to the next receiver and so on. So here also we can set the reference, right? So from one receiver to other receiver, we can set the reference. So this one we'll see in the example. How we can set the reference once one object is not able to receive, then he can pass to the that reference object. Okay. Now here is the UML diagram. You can see it. So client and client request to the handler, and then here the concrete handler too. And we can see that the successor, right? So successor, that means we can set the successor of one object to other object. So if any request is coming and the first object is trying to handle it, if that first object is not able to handle that request, then it will pass to the successor object. Okay, so we can set the successor of the each and every object. Okay, so for example, if I have the manager, right, manager for the approval wise manager CEO, right, I can set the once it will request go to the manager. If manager is not able to handle, then directly it will, so I will set the successor of the manager to the CEO. So then request will directly go to the CEO. So we'll see this one in one of the right example. So where and when the chain of the responsibility is applicable, when you want to decouple a request sender and receiver. So first thing is when you want to decouple the request and receiver part. So we know that in the chain of the responsibility, when we send the request, right, any of the receiver can uh, receive the request and work on this, right? So multiple objects determine the runtime, determined at the runtime are candidate to handle the request. So multiple object is there, they can try to handle the object, right? When you don't want to specify the handler explicitly in your code, okay? So any of the, in this case, any of the object will, right, try to handle the request. If you specify like, if you give the successor, then the request will go to the right from that object to the next successor object. Okay. So when you want to issue a request to one of the several objects without specifying the receiver explicitly. So we'll see that the advantage of the chain of the responsibility pattern, it reduces the coupling, right? So this is the advantage. So once the coupling is right reduced, then it's easy to maintain the code. Okay. It adds the flexibility while assigning the responsibility to the object. It allows a set of the classes to act as a one event produced in one class can be sent to the other handler class with the help of the composition, right? So chain of the responsibility design pattern, some of the important points we'll discuss here. So client does not know which part of the chain will be responsible for the right, which part of the chain is processing that request. So client don't know. Client just send a request, and then we have a lot of right object that is that's supposed to handle that request. So any of the object will handle the request, but client don't know about this, which object is handling the request. Okay, and it will send the request to the first object in a chain. Right. For example, in our program, right, uh, like ATM dispense chain. In ATM system, when we try to withdraw the money, right, it we just send as a request, and from inside, right, the ATM, it process it. It will go to the different object, right? It takes 100 rupees, 200, 500, right? Uh, Currency and finally distance. So as a user, we don't know like what is the process, which are the object is handling the request, but finally we get the output. Each object in the chain will have its own implementation to process the request. Okay. So each and every object in the chain have their own implementation. They can process their requests independently, either full or partial, or send it to the next object in a chain. So they each and every object can set the successor also. Every object in the chain should have the reference to the next object, okay, in a chain to forward the request. So that we are already talked about the successor, right? The chain of the responsibility design pattern is good to achieve the loose coupling, but come with the trade-off of having a lot of implementation classes and maintenance problem. If most of the code is common in all of the implementation. So see, the when we implement this chain of the responsibility, we have to create multiple classes. Okay, the code will be huge, but it's easy to maintain. So here I have just created one right graph here. Here I have created the chain, how the request will come and how the object will handle it. So suppose request is coming and this is the chain of the responsibility, right? These are the object is there and request is coming once. Then it will go to the right request managing director. Okay. If managing director is able to handle the request, right? Is suppose something is coming for the approval in an industry and if it is going to the managing director, if he will able to right approve that request, then it's fine. Otherwise, he will send to the next level of or his successor, the request president, right? Otherwise, finally, it will go to the CEO, right? So this is basically the like kind of the chain. Each and every object are connected with the successor, and they will try to handle the request. Now we'll take one example and try to understand it through code. Thank you.